Hi people, Marina Ray from here again as always and as usual. As always, based on the header of this video, you can tell what time it is. Today I'm going to discuss mental illness and specifically its astrological signs. So essentially just astrology and its involvement in mental illness, or its significators, if you will. Keep it real simple, obviously. For starters, you need to be able to actually input your astrological information, so your date, time, and location of birth, or at the very least only your date and location of birth, into any astrological application or website that automatically will give away the constellation under which you were born, the planetary constellation under which you were born. So people are familiar with that as a basic level at least. This is just for the people that, for example, have never even done this, where they actually know what zodiac signs were in which planets when they were born or anything relating to that. So this is just so you know. If you're one of those people, that's all you need to do. Just Google free astrology website, and then or a free astrology chart website, and then you simply go to it, okay? Or you can check the link in the description below of this video. I'm simply going to add a couple of free ones for you so that you can do it yourself in case you're completely unfamiliar with this. All you have to input is your date of birth, so the month, date, and time, or day, month, year, and so day, month, year, or month, day, year, you name it. And where you were born, city and country, or city, state, or province and country. The time only if you have it, and if you're unsure about the time, I'd rather not. I would say, hey, don't bother with the time. Just the date and time, the date and location of your birth are enough. Now let's get started. Okay, the same way that medical science essentially has. Specifically when it comes to psychology, they have added labels to certain facets of mental illness, the ones that they're familiar with, and they simply call them mental disorders, and they have mapped things out in a symptom-like way, the same way that physical illnesses are mapped out. Generally speaking, I am also superficially fond of psychological or the medical world's take on mental illness, but it only goes so far. Like I said, only superficial. The reason is that essentially the medical world isn't all too fit in terms of treating mental illness. Okay, they're simply trying to they're trying to identify and treat mental illness as if it's a physical disease. Okay, science works purely with the physical and not with the spiritual or the mental. So it's a little hard at best. I think most people know this. At best, what most thingies do, what most institutions do, or what most medical centers do that occupy themselves with mental illnesses or psychological illnesses, you name it, they simply quote unquote pump you full of drugs and to numb you out. That's the only way they can treat it. Okay, absolute worst case scenario, disaster scenario is simple institutionalization. The same way that criminals are housed, people that are mentally ill to the point where they are either a danger to themselves or to society, or both. And it severely impacts day-to-day life for them to the point where they can't function like normal people, like normal human beings. Yeah, okay, these people are generally speaking institutionalized. Again, absolute worst case disaster nightmarish scenarios that they get placed in an isolation chamber or a padded cell with a straitjacket, and that's the end of that. Okay, the key, hypothetically speaking, is thrown away. The outline is similar as for criminals, but in a different way. They essentially don't know what to do with you, so they're simply going to lock you somewhere away and away from society, and that's the end of that. Now, I need to say all of this beforehand, obviously, just so that the whole subject matter is clear where we stand. Now, in reality, mental illness, okay, can be identified like that. That's why it's called mental illness. Okay, through esoteric means, yeah, it is a lot more identifiable and it makes a lot more sense to put it that way. Like I said, okay, science simply tries to treat mental illness like it's a physical illness by following the basic outlines, the likes of which I mentioned: symptoms, okay, through possible forms of treatment, possible causes, etc., etc., etc. They get all of that from observation, from having observed several people, but they don't know how to treat it. Like I said, the only thing they can do in general, if not, their basic tactics don't work, which rarely do, then they simply thingy you. They pump you full of drugs to keep you docile. These drugs have like a comatose effect on you. They essentially neutralize you spiritually, up to a slight extent, to the point where you don't say or do anything, and you're just quiet because they don't know what to do with you. It's like someone that can't stop running around and has way too much energy, and the person is essentially just shot or similar. And that's the only way the person will sit quietly. But it's a crude and blunt example, but yeah, you get the gist of it. Now, onto the subject itself. Okay, in relation to mental illness, astrology as esoteric science, the near perfect fusion of esotericism and science, as I like to put it, definitely sheds light on this in quite an easy manner. Okay, so I'm simply going to discuss the planets and zodiac signs that deal with mental illness, and how, generally speaking, by looking at someone's birth chart, just by looking at the placement that someone was born under, you can immediately tell whether they are mentally ill or not. Okay, generally speaking, like I said, the basic outline of astrology is, or the general consensus is, that the planets and the zodiac signs they were in, and all the other relationships to the planets they have, all the other planets called aspects and everything else, and in which houses they're in, all of that give away one's personality, one's God-given personality, essentially, the traits you were given at birth upon the second you were born. All of that, the constellation, the planetary alignments you were born under essentially mirror that. They're not responsible. Still, for people that still unaware of this in an in-depth detail, or up to an in-depth detail, they're not responsible for that. Okay, that's not how things work. The planets literally don't bestow traits upon you. No. Even if I say that, I simply mean it in a loose fashion. The planets simply mirror what has been decided by higher up, in a matter of speaking. The same way that we all as children have learned how to tell time, or learn to tell time at some point, generally speaking, in our school years, elementary school, or even before that, kindergarten, you name it. That doesn't mean that the clock, that the long and the short hand, or the arms on the clock are responsible for the actual movement of time, or the actual flow of time. No, they simply indicate what we already know and have confirmed as human beings through observation and science and whatnot. Okay, so simply the movement of the earth and everything involved that makes time pass. Okay, the clocks that we use, whether it be digital, analog, blah blah blah, you name it, they simply indicate all of that. It's the same thing with astrology. Okay, the planets, the zodiac signs that they are in, the houses they are in, and all the other relationships called aspects that they are intertwined with, or that they have a relationship with, or are aspected to, better said, they simply convey, quote unquote, what time it is in relation to your personality. Of course, this can be changed. If you have a person, that's simply your set personality. Change is going to be ridiculously hard, make no mistake about it, but it can be done. I repeat, it can be done. Okay, with years of hard work, you can change one or multiple of your character traits and minimize them or undo them altogether. You name it. An extremely intense event, something shell-shocking like a trauma like no other, etc. That can also definitely cause your natural character traits to either be diminished partially or fully, or anywhere in between, or outright purged altogether. But bottom line is, when you're born, the second you're born, the constellation that you're born under sets your personality in place. Essentially, it indicates, hey, this person is going to be like this person is going to be like that, this person is going to be good at this person is going to be bad at that, this is going to happen to him or her in his or her life, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Okay, it simply indicates fate, the same way a clock tells time. Okay, so it tells you what time it is in relation to your own personal life and whatnot. In relation to people's lives and their character traits, that's specifically natal astrology. Now let's literally get down to the nitty-gritty of it. The things you need to be on the lookout for in the way of astrological indicators. that someone is mentally ill or is going to be mentally ill in their life or over the course of their life, whether it be partially, fully, or somewhere in between, or halfway, you name it. The first up I'm going to treat is the 12th house. The astrological 12th house is the house that the zodiac sign Pisces rules over. This house rules just like its zodiac sign itself. I'm going to combine both because they both mean the same thing in essence. Pisces, it deals with mental illness on a negative note. Okay, it deals with mental illness. People, for example, that were born under an unfavorable position in some way, shape, or form. I'm going to go into detail about that slightly later and give examples. In any case, people who have negative Piscean connotations in the constellation that they were born under, yeah, it spells mental illness, okay? Plain and simple. So if someone has a chart in which Pisces is really in a negative position, then yeah, it spells for mental illness. The kind of mental illness all depends on all the other aforementioned factors, okay? Specifically details regarding your constellation. Anything you can think of, honestly. You can list several mental disorders, you name it. These can range from being mundane to the point where they don't interfere with your life to something extensive and not just a little, you know, as in just being quote unquote cuckoo, to the point where you do need to be institutionalized. The more afflicted and the more negative Piscean connotations are, the more afflicted the person will be, and the more mental instability and all the other mental illnesses that are known to the world and then some, the person will display. The type of illnesses or illness the person will display, like I said, all depends on the aforementioned factors. Now let's move on to planets, okay? An example immediately that I'm going to give is Saturn, for example. Saturn in either Pisces or in the house that Pisces rules over, the 12th house, yeah, it's bad news in general. Saturn in general does not function well in Pisces. Someone that's born under Saturn in Pisces, so the planet Saturn was in the zodiac sign Pisces when the person was born, or it was in the astrological house that that Pisces rules over, yeah, the person at the very least is going to, generally speaking, display superficial levels of mental illness or illnesses, things that don't really inflict or cause harm in the person's life overall as well as day-to-day interaction, but things that will be annoying to the average person, honestly, to anybody interacting with him or her. Yeah, there's going to be trouble. Anything you can think of, it can be super minor, and on a heavier note, okay, it can be the extremest of examples. The person is going to get institutionalized, the person is going to get admitted into a psych ward, you name it. A badly afflicted Saturn, for example Saturn in Pisces or in Pisces' house going retrograde, so in the opposite direction in an astrological sense, or a Saturn that has negative aspects, like I said, or relationships to other planets, negative aspects to other planets like the moon, the sun, Mars, you name it, any of the other planets. Yeah, it's not good. If any professional astrologer that looks into the matter in detail will be able to point out, provided that the information is actually there, it's detailed enough, that what kind of mental illnesses the person is going to display. But like I said, that's the best case scenario, and the worst case scenario is that the person is simply going to be thrown in the loony bin, bluntly put. The person is seriously going to be admitted, and the person will display severe levels of mental illness. We're talking about breaks from reality, schizophrenia. The person is completely out of touch with reality, and the person has no idea where he or she is and what he or she is doing. The person will do things such as even consume their own fecal matter. We're talking about severely scary behavior, especially to the average person, behavior that no person would tolerate in their presence in any way, shape, or form. That's simply an example, okay? Generally speaking, that's the only problem that Saturn would indicate. Saturn is not too big on mental illness. Unless it's in Pisces, like I said, or it is in the house that Pisces rules over, the way I described, then generally speaking, Saturn won't have too big of an impact on someone's mental illness. There are exceptions, but in general, yeah, that's it. Next up is Neptune. Now, Neptune and the other planets that I'm going to mention now have a lot more to do with that. A lot more. Neptune, generally speaking, simply stands for someone's spiritual state of mind, essentially. A Neptune that is well placed, well aspected, an exalted Neptune. So Neptune is nice and strong. For example, Neptune in Pisces, Neptune in Aquarius, it just goes on. Neptune is in a water sign. Neptune functions generally well in water signs, Cancer, you name it, etc. A Neptune that is well aspected and strong will convey high levels of clairvoyance, essentially a good bond with the spiritual cosmos. Okay, someone that has a strong Neptune is someone that is highly clairvoyant, someone that will easily be able to communicate with spirits and spiritual entities, someone that will have a very well developed intuition, as in the person can outright sense, like in a movie almost, when something's going to happen before it happens. You name it. Okay, of course, also in the zodiac signs, there are houses that I mentioned. For example, in the 12th house, so the house of Pisces, or in the 11th house, the house of Aquarius, or in the 4th house, the house of Cancer. Any of these houses that they're and their respective zodiac rulers. Now, a negative Pisces, like I said, a negative Neptune. A negative Neptune. I repeat, a negative Neptune that is, for example, heavily afflicted. A Neptune that's going retrograde will bestow, in the best case scenario, or will indicate, better said, in the best case scenario, will indicate mental confusion. The person in general doesn't know what he or she wants. The person is just, on occasion, acting a little crazy, so to speak, as in the person does things that don't really make sense at a superficial level, but nothing serious. That's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is that the person will just outright do things that do not make sense and things that are dangerous to the person's own health, whether it be psychologically or physically, as well as to the health of others. Okay, very similar to what I already mentioned in relation to Saturn and Pisces, etc. Let's just say Neptune, a Neptune that's going retrograde, so heavily afflicted, has a lot of negative aspects. And Neptune is, for example, Neptune is generally speaking weaker in earth signs. So think Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. For example, Neptune in Capricorn going retrograde, and Neptune has bad aspects to other planets, the Moon, Mars, etc. You name it. That's a heavily afflicted Neptune like that. A weak Neptune will, generally speaking, stand for being so cold to the point where, as in emotionally cold, to the point where it's just plain mental illness. Someone can die, for example, someone the person deeply cared about, and the person will still be cold to it. Yeah, the person is cold to the gruesomest of situations. Let's just say someone that has the potential to be a killer, to be a serial killer. That's what Neptune bestows. The person can also just move up and down for no reason, literally no reason. The person will just immediately sell their belongings and then move to a whole other country that is not the most pleasantest in the way of quality of life. Anyone, okay, it could be anything like that. Okay, they just do things out of the blue, you name it. Okay, stuff like that, nah, not good. They can also be, for example, tormented by spirits and whatnot. They attract negative energies towards them. You name it. They get taken advantage of. They're super sensitive. You name it. Pisces also has a couple of these, notable the last two. Okay. Pisces also, on a negative note, like I described earlier when I was treating Pisces, also has a high level of sensitivity and being taken advantage of because of the high level of sensitivity. Anything you can think of. Like I said, these are all linked with one another. That's why they have more than a few things similar or in common. What else can I say in the way of examples? Neurosis is an example of a mental illness. Neurosis simply stands for having the same thoughts go through your mind at intermittent points in time. It could be something that happened to you 10, 20 years ago, or something that happened to you 1 or 2 days ago. Simply your mind recycling the same thoughts over and over again. Yeah, that's a mundane mental, it's not a mental illness even, it's a mundane mental disorder. I, for example, naturally had that, for people that know me, because I was born under Neptune in Capricorn in the 12th house. Neptune does not do well in earth signs, so Neptune was mildly afflicted, honestly, mildly to moderately afflicted, somewhere in between. No heavy affliction, but also no easy affliction. And as a result, yeah, I know I've had this my entire life, but I don't really mind because it doesn't classify as mental illness. It simply classifies as a mental disorder, a mundane one. It doesn't cause problems in my day-to-day life or in my life in the long term. It's simply something that happens at random moments, you name it. It could be once a day, twice a day, generally speaking, over the course of my life between birth and now. That's just an example, okay, because I'm a real life example of that. For the rest, that is it in relation to Neptune. So keyword that you simply need to keep in mind, okay, a heavily afflicted Neptune will simply stand for mental confusion, okay, the person being mentally confused and just displaying, generally speaking, mental illness, okay, simply doing things that make no sense, behaving in a way that makes no sense, behaving in a way that's more self-destructive, honestly. Before I continue, Jassy, speaking of self-destructancy or self-destructive tendencies, Pisces also has that, okay. Pisces also deals with self-undoing, so essentially self-harm. Think of someone that's suicidal and is cutting themselves as a result or consequence, those risk cutter type of people. Yeah, that also falls under Pisces. Like I said, Neptune does well in Pisces unless it's heavily afflicted. If Neptune was in Pisces, for example, and it was going retrograde with negative aspects, then oh boy, then yeah, no, it's bad news. It's really bad news. Someone's like that is going to be really, really mentally ill. Unless all the other planets or the majority of the other planets simply, they nullify it by indicating nothing but mental health. Just an example. In that case, these forces will simply go against each other, and the one that is more dominant will prevail. Now, other planet after Neptune is Uranus. Uranus is very similar to Neptune. There's not a lot to say. Uranus also embodies all the things I said just now, a negative Uranus. So Uranus that's heavily afflicted. Okay, a best case scenario is that the person on occasion will simply be spontaneous, but not in a good way. The person will be prone to changing their mind. The person says A today and then Z tomorrow. That's the best case scenario, mind you. Worst case scenario is that the person will be outright bipolar. Uranus is the planet that deals with bipolar disorder. For people that don't know what bipolar is when someone displays contradictory or paradoxical behavior. Imagine someone that was born under Uranus, for example, in Aquarius. Uranus is at its strongest in Aquarius. But the Uranus was going retrograde, and Uranus is heavily afflicted. Uranus has negative aspects with other planets and whatnot. Or Uranus is in the 12th house. Someone like that will be super bipolar, honestly. The person will literally be smiling 1 minute and crying the other. The person will do things just out of nowhere, literally. The person will literally just do something, like I said earlier with Neptune, just simply pack up and move to a different location for no concernable or logical reason. The person will also contradict themselves, as in making statements that they'll refute, for example, the following day. The person says, for example, I love peaches today, and then tomorrow it's going to be, no, I don't like peaches. And then it just goes on and on and on in like a loop-like fashion. It's that's not good at all, of course. The person might also have a lot of idiotic ideas that make no sense. Like I said, no sense whatsoever. These can range from mundane to severe. That's an example in any case. Uranus, for example, does not do well in the fire signs. Uranus does well in air signs, Aquarius, Libra, and whatnot. It doesn't, for example, do well in earth signs and fire signs. It also does well in water signs, so Cancer, but it doesn't do well in like Aries or in Virgo. Nah, that's afflicted. Okay, someone like that is no. Well, like I said, worst case scenario is extreme bipolar disorder, plain and simple. The last planet that I'm going to treat is the moon. These planets in general, okay, like I said, Saturn is the one that has the least to do with mental illness. Saturn only when it's in Pisces, or if it's in the house that Pisces rules over, then it's going to display those kinds of traits. But the moon, Neptune, and Uranus, all of these have to do with someone's state of mind and overall mental health, honestly. Other planets as well, before I finish up with the moon. But like I said, these are only generalized, similar to Saturn. Mercury, for example, the same thing. Since Mercury deals with your mind and your thought process or thought processes, if Mercury were to be in Pisces, for example, which it does not function well in, and it is heavily afflicted, it's a very weak Mercury, then yeah, the person is going to suffer from mental illness. The person is going to display all the other things I mentioned before with Saturn and Pisces, okay? General self-harm, scatterbrainedness, simply overall mental instability, mental disorganization. That's all you need to keep in mind. The person will have difficulty remembering their life in proper order, as in the way things happen, what year they happen. It just goes on, okay? The person will be the opposite of a genius that has a quick wit about him or her and that is flexible, mentally flexible. Yeah, last planet is the moon. The moon, essentially, by default, the moon rules the element water, okay, from an esoteric perspective. And astrologically, the moon is also strong in all water signs, so Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. Now, a heavily afflicted moon, the moon is weak in earth signs. Think Virgo, Taurus, and Capricorn by default. In Taurus, it can be strong, but it depends on the situation in detail, in-depth as you can possibly think or be or conceive. Anyways, a heavily afflicted moon in general is not good, okay? A weak moon, a moon that's, for example, the sun and the moon, as far as I know, they never go retrograde, so they never go in the opposite direction, so there's a limit to how afflicted they can be. The moon by default, okay, is the fastest planet. The moon moves one zodiac sign changes one zodiac sign every 2 days or something, if I recall correctly. In any case, a heavily afflicted moon, just think of a moon in Virgo, think of a moon in Capricorn, and it has negative aspects. It's negatively aspected to Saturn, or a moon that is in the 12th house, but the moon is in an earth sign, like in Capricorn, for example, and it also is opposed other planets. It has a bunch of negative connotations to it. A weak moon, that would make it a weak moon. A weak moon, yeah, no, generally speaking, a weak moon will produce some of the traits similar to what I mentioned earlier. Someone that has a weak moon will be finicky about certain details. The person will be overly sensitive to criticism. The person will display unstable emotions, okay? So an example like I gave, okay? Bipolar, extreme bipolarness is an example. As in a person laughs one moment, yeah, and the other moment the person is like super depressed. Or the person laughs in situations where seriousness comes into play, or seriousness would be the normal mentally healthy response. For example, I was abused by my stepfather, and the person is like, and the person just laughs at that. Yeah, that's not good. That is, oh boy. Yeah, that's not good at all. That's not good at all, okay? That's simply something that you need to keep in mind. And for the rest, it's simply a mixture of several other mental illnesses. But with the moon, what sets it apart from the rest is that it's purely of an emotional nature, or at the very least for the most part. The moon purely has to do with emotions. The moon doesn't have to do with thought processes or one's level of spirituality like Neptune and whatnot. No. And Uranus, of course. No. The moon purely has to do with emotions. So someone that has a heavily afflicted moon, someone that was born under such a weak moon, is someone that's going to be emotionally unstable, honestly. And someone that's going to really display the traits that I displayed. I mean, that I conveyed. That I spoke of. And yeah, that's essentially the gist of it, honestly. These are things that you need to be on the lookout for in general, honestly. Unfortunately, I can't give like an example. I'm going to try to give an example, and if so, then I'll simply leave it either at the end screen or linked in the description, or place a pinned comment of my own in this video. But generally speaking, yeah, that's not good, okay? Someone that someone that is born under such a constellation with involving these planets in the way that I described, that's all you need to keep in mind. The moon, Uranus, Neptune, and the 12th house, okay, and the zodiac sign Pisces. There is no other zodiac sign that's as impactful upon mental health as Pisces. Pisces really specializes in that. Yeah, so if you know someone, for example, that's mentally ill, or you suspect someone like that, it's highly likely that they will have one of the afflictions, one or more of the afflictions I described. They'll have a quote unquote messed up constellation that they were born under, okay? Either Piscean activity, both the house that Pisces rules over as well as itself as a zodiac sign, afflicted, heavily afflicted, or heavily weakened Uranuses, Neptunes, and moons, essentially. Obviously, the moon especially, the moon. The other planets are more neutral, but the moon especially is more prevalent in women because of the moon indicates a heavy amount of femininity. So more women are subject to that. More women are subject to that. I have seen women in my life that are, or I've seen women, on for example, in the media that have displayed these kind of character traits. Some of them, nothing tremendous to the point where you'd say, hey, listen, this person needs to be institutionalized. But you can tell that the person wasn't born under a favorable moon. The moon was heavily afflicted when the person was born. The person did not do well for himself or herself. Well, herself, since like I said, it's very prevalent. Okay, the moon itself is heavily emphasized with women. It's a lot stronger with women than with men. So yeah, that's essentially the gist of it. I hope this was educational for you guys, and see you guys later as always. Bye.